You're listening to the Navigating Leadership Podcast, a podcast where you get to sit in on conversations I'm blessed to have with leaders from around the country and right here at home. I'm Dave Freund, and welcome. This week, Marisa is back, and we dig into my weekly post titled, How Are You Feeling? Let's jump into the conversation and see what we discovered. Marisa, how are you today?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm terrific. So we got excellent and terrific again.
Yes, it's summer.
I was going to say it has to be because it's summer.
Yes,
So
I'm having a lot of fun.
It was, we talked about this the last time you and I were on recording, but our pool has gotten more use this summer than any year since we put it in, which isn't that many, and I actually was going to try to go in last night, and then the rains came.
Yeah.
And then it dropped down to like 70 degrees outside. And I thought, no, I really don't want to go. Even though the pool was probably 84, I do not want to jump in if it's 70 degrees, but it's been great.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a really nice summer.
And I love how you talked about a new hobby, something that you can do by the pool.
Oh, yes. My new hobby, my hand embroidery.
Yes, that's lovely. I love it.
Yeah, it was fun. It's been fun. A friend of mine, she's like, if we don't have something specific to get together around,
right?
Like we'll always say, oh, we should get together. And like, we've both got families. We both work outside of the home. Like there's just it doesn't happen. But there was a workshop, and then we had to sign up for it, right? We had to buy tickets and sign up for it.
Wow.
So once you do that, you're pretty committed.
Yes.
So we went to this workshop, and it's a nice little activity where I can, I'm also very excited because it's the Summer Olympics right now. So I can watch the Olympics and do my little hobby or sit by the pool.
That's great. When you mentioned that, it reminded me that when my kids were little, my wife was doing a lot of cross stitch. And we both started a project at the same time. And she was going to do our youngest son, Timothy's name in this cross stitch. It was like beautiful with like characters around each letter kind of thing. And I was building a bunk bed. And we kind of challenged each other to say, who is going to finish their project first? And believe it or not, I got doing the bed, I was taking an existing bed and then creating like the bunk bed that goes at like 90 degrees to the bed that's there.
Oh, yes.
But I had to make all these, and I turned the spindles on a wood lathe. I did all this stuff. And believe it or not, it has to be I finished first or I wouldn't have brought it up. But I actually finished first, and I think she actually shortened it from Timothy to Tim, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I believe it. Cross stitch is it's tough. It's a lot tedious.
And when you have kids like Bethany, Michael, Jeremy, and Timothy, Tim was much easier. But so part of the reason why I brought that up, and why I think you brought it up before we started hitting recording, was because it said the title was How Am I Feeling? Or How Are You Feeling? And I discovered that even though I was really enjoying the summer, I was a little bit miserable. And really down and not energized. And what I discovered was I wasn't learning and growing. So what are your thoughts around that topic?
Well,
that we need to learn and grow to really be happy.
Yeah. Well, your post took me by surprise, because I didn't necessarily notice you didn't seem miserable in my interactions with you. But then I started to think, well, yeah, he's probably a little off his normal routine, right? Between summer and your vacation and different training and coaching schedule for you, just given our members change in schedules for the summer.
Right.
But and then I started to realize, okay, I can see why he's probably feeling this way, but I think it makes a lot of sense, right? To me, it really comes down to like any kind of exercising of the mind can really add value to your life. And I think it adds years to your life. I think it's really important to, whether it be, from a professional development standpoint, or reading, hobbies is kind of how I
Yes.
related it when we were talking before this. But um, I think it's really easy to get, like, there are things that we have to do in life, and
Right.
we have many routines, and those are really great, and they serve us in many ways that
Yes.
are also important. But two things can be true at the same time without something else, typically something novel or new, like learning. It'll start to just feel like Groundhog Day.
Yes. I love that. We're living the same day over and over. And what happened was I went on a vacation. I went on a retreat slash conference for my church. Um, I was having a lot of fun. I had some nice dinners. I
Hmm.
went out on the boat. And what I noticed was that the happiness moments, if I can call it that, were very short-lived. And as soon as that
Hmm.
activity was done, the energy was gone.
Hmm.
And then I had scheduled some training in my calendar that I wanted. This is something that came out of of my 6 month reflection. And after I would finish one of those online training sessions, I was so energized. I remember a couple times, because I was doing it from my home office, going to tell my wife, "Hey, you can't believe what I just learned."
Hmm.
This energizing was there.
Hmm.
And then something else that I realized was, and this really, I think, of course, I don't think we have too many retired people listening to the podcast, but not having a training that I had to deliver, so to speak. So I trained, my last training was the last week of June. Then
Hmm.
just last week, I did a training for our PEB group,
Hmm.
and I was so energized.
Hmm.
And the point is, if when we're doing something that requires us to think, that engages the brain, where we're
Hmm.
really interacting with people, we're energized.
Hmm.
So the points that I came up with for the post that went out was, when we learn and grow, we get energized and we feel better.
Hmm.
A growth mindset helps alleviate stress. Learning and growing builds resilience, and learning and growing builds self-esteem. Now, some
Hmm.
people would say, well, I don't want to be proud. No, that's not what self-esteem is. Self-esteem is understanding that you have value and you bring value to
Hmm.
people. So learning and growing really drives us in that area. It kind of builds us up, makes us feel this a sense of well-being type of thing.
Hmm.
So as you thought about it and you looked at my post, what did any thoughts come to your mind?
I agree, right? I think those all make sense to me. Um, if I had to pick one that I liked the most, I would say a growth mindset helps alleviate stress.
Okay.
I liked that one. I think, um, especially in today's day and age, right? Like,
Yes.
I think it more common than not. If you ask someone, "Are you stressed or not stressed?" They'll probably say they're stressed,
Right.
in one place or another, whether it be in their home life, their work life, what have you.
Yes.
Um, but I think it's an outlet.
Right. And what I loved about when I was thinking about that, it reducing stress, what happens is, if I have a growth mindset, rather than looking at a problem as a problem, I look at it as a challenge. And the reality is that we are going to go through whatever life brings us.
Mhm.
You don't
You don't
have
have
a
a
choice.
choice.
You're going to go through it, but you do have a choice as to whether or not you grow through it.
Hmm.
And if all of a sudden I can look at this challenge and say, okay, what's the opportunity here? You know, wow, when you and I were doing the podcast regularly, a lot of it was during that global pandemic that we had,
Hmm.
and we talked about, it was a nightmare, but there were a lot of opportunities that opened up because of it.
Hmm.
And so anytime I face a challenge, I have to say to myself, what's the opportunity?
Hmm.
Um, I I I was meeting with a coaching client yesterday, and one of the things that we talked about was, and he has a very, very large team, and some of the people on the team you're not as close to as others. But I said, the people that you're not as close to, you need to lean in and build a relationship with them. And that's not a natural feeling. Like we
Mm-hmm.
don't want to go do that. But what I've learned in my past was that, and there was one guy, I used to use this gentleman as an example of you have to sometimes lead people that you don't like. But over the years, he and I actually established a really close friendship. And when I left Self Lock, he was one of the hardest people to say goodbye to. Just because that challenge that was there became an opportunity for me to grow, get
Mm-hmm.
out of my comfort zone, and learn as much as I could about him. And that's really the key to establishing a relationship is learning about other people.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, there's a lot of things I enjoy about having conversations with this person. I didn't know this, I didn't know that. So
Mm-hmm.
that was, I think too, if I was going to look at one, especially now, that a growth mindset alleviates stress. It gets you to move away from feeling like you're trapped
Mm-hmm.
to I have a lot of opportunities ahead of me, which is exciting. Now, I sent you some notes as well because I just once I got started on this topic, I can't stop. I need to see what some experts are saying
Mm-hmm.
about it as well. Um, of the other things that you saw, and I'll give you a second as I'll kind of talk a little bit as you're going, but as you look at some of those other things that a growth mindset helps you with, a couple of them that jumped out at me. One that I mentioned this to you, it shocked me was that having a growth mindset improves your romantic relationships. And I
Mm-hmm.
just like when I first saw that, I'm like, oh my goodness, can that really be? And then, as I mentioned earlier, as I was driving home last night from work, I was listening to a marriage podcast, and this gentleman who had been married 38 years said one of the greatest things that you can do to enhance your marriage, I forgot how he worded it, your relationship, is to stay curious.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought how true that was. When my wife and I got married, we didn't know that much about each other. She was from Europe. I was your typical born and raised kind of Midwest, upstate New York kind of person. Um, we had a lot of similarities, but I didn't know anything about her I didn't know what it was like growing up in Austria.
Mm-hmm.
And we would spend hours just talking about each other's past.
Mm-hmm.
So what was this like? What was that like? And I don't know when we've spent 10 minutes lately talking about something
Mm-hmm.
other than, when are the kids
What do you
coming?
want for dinner?
Yeah, what do you want for dinner? And the point was, I need to be more curious. I need to have this growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
about her,
Mm-hmm.
because well, actually, in a couple of weeks, we will have been married 43 years,
Wow.
and I mean, I love her more than I've ever loved her, but there's a lot of things that have changed in her, and I want to find
Mm-hmm.
out what those things are. So now I gave you some time to kind of look at some of those other ones. Did any of those jump out at you?
Yes, I think several of them did. I'm going to start back up at the top. There was, oh, there was one I liked. Let me go back to it here. Um, no longer limit your talents and abilities.
Yes.
So I really like that one because I think a lot of times we'll think like I am who I'm an adult
Yep.
now and this is just who I am, or like I'll never be good at XYZ because I didn't start when I
Hmm.
was 16, or you
Right.
can't teach an old dog new tricks, or
Yep.
all of these
Yeah.
kind of self-limiting beliefs. That plus a combination of I think a lot of, and this might be unique to millennials, I'm not sure. So I guess I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I think you see this a lot in millennials, and it's even kind of become problematic for Gen Z and younger, this idea that it's not worth doing something if you can't be really, really good at it. It's this like
Oh,
this
sure.
achievement culture.
Yes.
It's like if you can't be in the top 10% of the group doing it, then like don't even try because so many other people will do it better than you.
Yep.
Um, and that's no way to to live your
Yeah.
life, right? I think some things like can just be enjoyable or be fulfilling. Like, when you talk about building the bunk beds.
Right.
You could have done a few things. You could have bought it and
Right.
it probably would have been suitable,
Mhm.
and the everything would have probably been perfectly even and symmetrical, and all that would have been easy. You
Right.
could have done that. You probably could have found a carpenter who's been working
Sure.
strictly in woodworking for 50 years, who would make you the most beautiful
Yep.
bed, and it would be an heirloom that you'd cherish forever.
Right.
Or you could do it your way, right?
Yeah,
And I bet that you probably found a lot of fulfillment in
I
that.
did.
I bet Frida was very proud and grateful for
I hope
that.
so. Yeah,
And I'm sure the kids loved it,
they
you
did.
know? And that's like, you could have limited, yourself to just, oh, I'm not going to do it because someone could do it better. But instead, you got all of those things out of that experience.
Yes. Yeah. No, I love that. And I love this point too about, no longer a limit on your talents. And one of the things you and I talked about before we hit record was that for us to get this energized feeling, we don't necessarily have to be growing in our professional career.
No.
You talked about needlework, you talked
Mm-hmm.
about gardening
Mm-hmm.
before we hit record. Um, I added on, I'm still adding on to the deck around our pool, and I've never
Mm-hmm.
cut stair stringers before.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just looked, I know how to use all the tools to make a stair stringer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I found some really good YouTube videos, and then wouldn't you know, I made them and I thought everything was good. And then all of a sudden I realized I miscalculated something on the one end, on the bottom step. So now, and then I thought, well, okay, I'll just have a little extra rise, like 3/4 of an inch extra on the first step. Well, number one, I don't think that's code. It might be. Number two, it's going to bother me forever. But I was just going to put up with it. And then all of a sudden, and don't ask me how this happened, but I was sitting in church on Sunday and during a Bible study, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, I can fix each one of those steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I figured out exactly how to do it. Now, if the weather permits, I might actually do it tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I felt so good that I figured out how to fix it. It
Mm-hmm.
has nothing to do with my professional career.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause trust me, I'm never going to be a carpenter, not at 63 years
Mm-hmm.
old, but
But you practiced like
I
problem
practiced.
solving, right? Like
Yes.
that's critical
Yep.
thinking, that's problem solving, that's creative thinking. Like these
Yes.
are things when, right? A lot of times when you're like drafting a job description or thinking about the people you want to join your team, like, oh, well, they
Right.
they they need to be a critical thinker. Well, what does that really mean? How do
Yes.
you really define a critical thinker? Or you think of like, oh, a problem solver, which,
Right.
in fifth grade, they define that by the train is going 30 miles per hour and
Yes.
you're
And
at
I
the,
hated those. They were
that's how
great
they
problems.
measured problem solving back, academically. But like in the real world, how do you practice that? How do you
Right.
even see that in another person?
Right.
It's through examples like this where like you were faced with a challenge and you found a solution.
Yeah. And my wife kept saying it when I started this project, why don't we just hire somebody? Why don't we just hire somebody?
Uh-huh.
And one of my real reasons was I didn't want to pay somebody else to do what I can do. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it would have been smart to hire somebody a year ago because it would have been done. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but last fall I was going to do it, and then that's when I had pneumonia for 2 months, and it was just like,
Yeah.
okay, fine. Um, and then I also had to get to a point where I'm okay if it isn't done as quickly
Mm-hmm.
because we have a deck. It's just we don't have as big a deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely separated by a gate, so not even the little ones can go over there and get hurt. But
Mm-hmm.
it felt so good to step back and look, wow, I actually did that.
Mm-hmm.
Energized, felt good about it, and
Mm-hmm.
saved some money.
Yeah.
Were there any others that surprised you or that spoke to you,
There was the one,
or any you
so
disagree with?
that I disagree with. I don't think I disagreed with any of them. I liked the comment here about better health.
Yep.
So the paragraph reads, stress from fears, perfectionism, and a lower standard of living, blah, 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 could weaken your physical and mental health. But by seeing the world through the lens of growth, puts your mind at ease. There's a whole
Mhm.
paragraph here. I won't read the whole thing, but
Yep.
I think that the part about like stress from fears and perfectionism
Right.
spoke to me because I think um, having a growth mindset and finding ways to exercise your brain towards that, whether it be through reading, podcasts,
Mhm.
hobbies,
Yes.
just facing a challenge, like the door is wobbly. How can I tighten it back up? Something like
Yep.
that
Hmm.
really forces you to, I think, face some of those things. And, this came up recently when I was talking to my mom. I can't remember what it was about. Oh, it was about tennis. So, um, this summer I've kind of decided to start my retirement preparation program, I'm calling it. So I've taken up a lot of hobbies so that when I finally retire, I'll have something to fall back on
Yep.
and hopefully be like decent at it and
Hmm.
in good health to do it. So I was playing tennis and I had taken a couple tennis lessons and my mom also takes tennis lessons with the same coach. And I think she said, well, I was talking to him and I told him that, you like pickleball more because I'm also doing pickleball.
Right.
And she says, I told him you like pickleball more because you're a perfectionist and XYZ. She told me, I said, well, mom, I don't define myself as a perfectionist anymore. Like I think I used to
Yep.
feel that way. But I think uh through exercising my mind and
Hmm.
doing just kind of expanding my horizons and doing
Sure.
some growth things here. Um, I don't feel that way anymore. I mean, there are certain things that I like a certain way. I don't think that's perfectionism, but with my gardening, could have I did a lot of landscaping this year. I could have easily hired someone to do some of it.
Sure.
Um, and it would have been done fast
Yep.
and accurately. And instead, I've really enjoyed the challenge of figuring it out myself. And sometimes that means doing something, not really liking the way it looks, because with landscaping, you don't, as an often symmetrical thinker, you don't
Oh,
really,
yes.
so symmetry and landscape design do not go hand in hand. So
Right.
I have had to dig things up because I'm like, no, symmetry always makes sense. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it the symmetrical way. And then I'm like, this looks terrible. Now I'm challenging my own thoughts here and I will dig it up and I will move it and, kind of
Sure.
go through that process and whether it be dirty and sweaty and rainy and hot and all of those things. And it's, I'd say, contributing to a better health for me.
Absolutely. And I love how you spoke about that. A growth mindset reduces the tendency to be a perfectionist.
Mhm.
And I remember when I first started writing my weekly posts, and before I would even let you see it, my son Tim would read it or Frida would read it,
Mhm.
and and then I started using this Grammarly app, and I
Mhm.
was so embarrassed to show you something that I didn't think was as close to perfect as possible. And then I realized, and you and I talked about it. You know what? It's not my job to make it perfect.
Mhm.
It was my job to come up with the content.
Mhm.
And after a while, I stopped focusing on, is this perfect? Because I don't want Marissa to think less of me.
Mhm.
There's a mistake in this. And when I worked on my growth mindset, it was like, you know what? She knows a lot more things about me that aren't perfect than what I just wrote here. So let's just work on content and let her do what's best. And together we can come up with something that is pretty close to perfect.
Mhm.
So I love that.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of the Olympics this summer, and
Oh yeah.
I've really appreciated some of the like primetime coverage where they'll feature various athletes and kind of not just how they train in the gym or how, a lot of swimmers, they've
Yep.
featured swimmers, a lot of gymnastics, um, and but how they've prepared mentally for the
Hmm.
games. And there's definitely been a focus on some of them who've really come through some significant mental health
Yes.
challenges and have really worked on themselves and changed kind of their thinking on, oh, it's just about how my athleticism.
Right.
And I think it was just last night or a couple nights ago, they had Suni Lee, the gymnast Suni Lee, talking about her journaling.
Yep.
And they had some snippets from her journal. And one of them was about, I think she just wrote something like my average performance is enough. Like I don't have to be perfect. I just need to try my best and like my average is enough.
Yep.
And I just thought that was really powerful. She said she journals like 5 to 6 pages a day of just kind of her
Wow.
thoughts, and then kind of reads through some of those key highlights
Hmm.
as she's preparing for the meet.
That's
But
impressive.
I just thought, that's really important, I think, for everyone to hear. But like that would be my children were watching that with me,
Yep.
and I could tell they were listening, right? And that's something
Great.
that I would want them to understand, is that like if you are trying your best, and if your
Yep.
best today is only 70, if you can only function today at 75%, maybe you didn't sleep well last night, like that's still your best. Like then
Mhm.
you're giving 100% of what you've got today. And I think that was, I'm so glad that they're sharing that on
Yeah.
the primetime coverage.
Yeah, and I love how, if she would focus on never measuring up and focused on it's got to be perfect, she
Hmm.
probably would have quit.
Hmm.
But it's, can I get a little bit better? What
Hmm.
can I learn from today?
Hmm.
Oh, you didn't rest enough. Okay, that's what I need to work on. Or you didn't eat the right things. Okay, that's something I need to work on. I
Hmm.
love that. And the other thing that I love is it helps us see what make what makes or enables people to be successful. One of the notes that I caught in this stuff that I had sent you was you become inspired by the success of others.
Hmm.
And I can really see that people that don't have a growth mindset sometimes even judge people that have had achieved success and say, well, they're just different. No, they worked harder. They applied themselves to something. They
Hmm.
tried things that I didn't try. And that's why they were able to achieve things. So I think with a growth mindset, we actually enjoy hearing stories about people that have achieved great things because it becomes inspirational rather than, well, he was just born in a better family, or he was,
Hmm.
she grew up in she went to a better school.
Hmm.
Well, no, some of these people had some real challenges that they overcame, and we
Hmm.
can be inspired by them rather than be judgmental of them or envious. Maybe that's another way to put it. Was there anything else that jumped out at you? Because I did have one more that spoke to me.
No, go ahead.
Um, Receptive to feedback.
Mm.
It's so obvious to me when I have somebody that wants me to do a 360 if they have a growth mindset or not. Like sometimes companies assign me to do a 360 for a person,
Mhm.
but I love the people that can't wait for the feedback. That just they're leaning in, they're just trying to grow and get better. And when
Mhm.
we have a growth mindset, we actually look at the feedback we get from people as a positive rather than a criticism.
Mhm. Or
So in
like,
my own,
do you think that people look at it and think, like, instead of taking it as directly, because I feel like if you absorb it directly, you could absorb things as a criticism. But if you look at it like, okay, those are the words that they said, but maybe why did they say that?
right.
Is that the difference, do you think?
Yeah, and yes, it's how and they look at, okay, this is their perception. How
Mm-hmm.
can I help correct that?
Mm-hmm.
Or how do I need to interact differently with them to get them what they're looking for, especially if this is a direct report speaking, as I'm doing a survey about a leader. Now, one of the things with my 360s is I ask the question, so why would you say that? So my 360s are never, type this answer into a box and hit
Mm-hmm.
send. it's a conversation with people. And I
Mm-hmm.
can really get to the why part of what's going on. Why would you say that? What makes you think that? And it gets to a much richer content. So I really think that that growth mindset becomes critical. And then there's other people where when I give them the results, they're just very defensive. I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking of one person in particular. And, there was a statement, and her 360 was very, very challenging. And she needs to grow. She needs to have a different mindset. But she actually laughed at a couple of the negative comments, and thankfully, after a bit of time and after a couple more conversations, I really think she's starting to use it as a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Because for her happiness, forget success at work. For her happiness, she really needs to make to grow in certain areas is really what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Good person, people love her, people like working with her. These are some challenges that she needs to address for her to be even not just more successful at work, but happier too.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anything you think we might have missed?
Think we covered a lot of ground. But
In
I know since we last talked about a month ago, I did have a few things to follow up with you on.
You did.
And, directly tied to this topic of having a growth mindset. Um, have you scheduled your learning time or your growth
I
time
have.
on
I
your
have.
calendar? Yeah.
And my goal is an hour a day.
Wow.
I don't always get an hour a day, um, but most days, yes.
Wow. 7 days a week or just
Five
weekdays?
days a week. Now, I suppose so. We talked about this growth piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting ready to go on a short trip with my wife, and we're going to meet up with my daughter-in-law's parents. Um, and I talked with you before we hit record on how can I make this a growth and learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose, ask me this next time, was I able to build growth into 7 days a week based on where am I going? What's some historical things around it? What did I learn while I was there?
Mm-hmm.
If we're looking at growing and developing just a mental awareness or strength,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that it would be 7 days a week. I think that's very doable.
Mm-hmm. So when
Now,
you think about that hour that you're building in, we'll say not on your vacation time, just like your
yeah,
typical, like tomorrow.
yes.
Do you include things like a podcast? So if you spend an hour in the car at least every day, I'm sure. If you're listening to
So
a podcast, does that count towards your
so it
learning
it
time?
does count, but that's like an extra.
Okay.
Like if I can't build in an hour, so typically it's I want to be working through some coaching and training videos that I need to. And what I love about the new Maxwell Leadership Platform is it used to be you just click through them and you
Mm-hmm.
could say you did it. Well, now you have to finish a quiz at the end of each module, and
Mm-hmm.
there's 10 different modules and sometimes 4 or 5 sessions per module. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
quiz after each session. So
Mm-hmm.
there could be 30 or 40 quizzes, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where I'd love to focus it. The reality is that some days I can't come up with an extra hour
Mm-hmm.
unless I would take it away from family time, which I don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would use, okay, my podcast time or audiobook time would qualify.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal or reading, but typically I do audiobooks rather than sitting and reading because I usually fall asleep if I have a book in my hand. For me, that's a sleep aid is to hold a book
Mm-hmm.
and read it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that I'm doing. There was one more. Do you remember what the other
Yes.
one was?
Yes. So kind of, on that topic of your scheduling, are you making sure to add buffer time
I
between
I
your
am.
appointments? Yeah.
And it took me a while to really work this in, but I'm noticing especially this week, and it's still early in the week, but through all my schedule for this week, the only time I have colors touch
Mm-hmm.
is, for instance, I'm going to a company this afternoon to do coaching, and I have 2 sessions back to back in the same company.
Mm-hmm.
Those are okay if one stops and the other one starts. But
Mm-hmm.
other than that, there's at least a 15 to 20-minute break in between each of them so I
Mm-hmm.
can process through what's going on and prepare for the next meeting.
That's great.
Yep. And I tell you, I feel so much more relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel behind and rushed.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly think I'm getting more done.
That's great. Very good.
I think we did it.
Awesome.
So I already told you what I'm doing. That's exciting. I'm going to be going on a quick trip. So
Hmm.
anything exciting in your family?
We've got just a lot of fun stuff coming up. We've got some family things planned. Still just really enjoying the summer and all of my hobbies.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think I've well, I haven't set a schedule like you have, and I certainly do not have a consecutive hour to set aside just about
No,
ever. Um,
no, you don't.
I've kind of set out with this informal, I found that my work was becoming my identity
Mm,
a bit. And especially over the last year, we've met a lot of new people, and I realized that it was becoming a problem. So I kind of set out with this informal idea of that my career would be the least interesting thing about me.
wow, interesting.
And so I still love my job. I still take it very seriously. It's still a
Yeah.
big part of who I am.
Hmm.
But um, when I die, I don't think it's gonna say, "Oh, she was a really good employee."
Right.
Right?
Yes.
I would hope that it would have some other my obituary would read with a bit more excitement. So
Yeah.
I am just kind of setting out to make that the least interesting. It can still be interesting, but
Sure.
that there will be other interesting things about me. So that's kind of continuing that
Awesome.
this summer.
That's terrific. And you know what's interesting is, and it's probably just because I know you and I've worked with you for over 8 years now. I wouldn't have thought of describing you by what your career is
Hmm.
because I've learned, well, because your career has progressed
Hmm.
significantly since I met you. But there were all the other things about your life that I just think are amazing
Hmm.
that I think define you. So I think the key is just making sure other people get to know that too. So
Hmm.
very good.
Yeah.
And I can't tell people what the next podcast is because I'm not certain of it yet. It's still in development. So
All
we're just going
right.
to wait and see. In 2 weeks, they'll know, right?
Sounds good.
I really enjoy my conversations with Marisa. It's always great to get her perspective on the topic and see where her takeaways are compared to mine. I especially liked our discussion around growth outside of our professional career and how that growth can also inspire us and actually create joy in our life. Until next time, I'm Dave Freund, and thanks for listening to the Navigating Leadership Podcast.